Exodus 23:1 says, "Thou shalt not raise a false report. Put not thine hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous witness." False reporting has now become standard practice among American news media. Mainstream reporters and news anchors are nothing but left-wing propagandists pretending to be journalists, with a few exceptions. When I was a kid, most people only complained about fake news with the National Enquirer and other tabloids. But when looking back with hindsight, we can see that Walter Cronkite, Tom Brokaw, Peter Jennings, Dan Rather, and other news anchors, along with other well-known reporters like Mike Wallace, Sam Donaldson, Barbara Walters, Ted Koppel, Harry Reasoner, and others, they were all just journalistic propagandists. They weren't real, hard, neutral news reporters, as we were told to believe. I don't have time to run down all the examples of fake reports and slanderous lies and hit pieces and everything put out by these propagandists that I just mentioned. But for example, do a search on Walter Cronkite and the World Federalist Association awarding him for his work to promote world government and dismantle American sovereignty when they gave him the Norman Cousins Global Governance Award. We've shown the video in the past. Look up the time CBS had to settle a libel suit filed by General Westmoreland after the Vietnam War for a false report by Mike Wallace accusing the general of various war crimes and telling lies. Or look up the stories about Mike Wallace's false report as he covered up the persecution of Jews in the Soviet Union. Look up Dan Rather's false report using forged memos to slander former President George W. Bush. Look up the fact that nearly everyone I mentioned funded and voted for Democrats and progressive rhino Republicans while slanting their reporting to favor their personal political agenda. And nothing has changed. As Ecclesiastes 1:9 says, there's no new thing under the sun. Jesus is speaking here in Exodus 23, and he says, "Thou shalt not raise a false report." Now, it's obvious that this applies across the board, whether you're making a report to the police or simply making a public statement of any sort or any kind about other people. But how often have you heard teachers, Bible teachers, include the reality that this text forbids fake news? Thou shalt not raise a false report. People ask me about the coming 1,000-year reign of Jesus on earth, and they'll ask me things like, do you think people will drive cars? Will there be radio, TV, and the internet? And of course, I have an opinion, and it's interesting conversation. But not too long ago, someone asked me for the first time that I can recall, do you think there'll be news networks during the Kingdom Age? And honestly, I hadn't thought of it. At least I don't recall ever giving that any thought. And I have to say that I hope there is, because in my experience and research, I believe that will be the first and only time that we'll get to watch news that truly is fair and balanced. It's a fact that if there is network news of any sort during the kingdom, Jesus will not put up with the kind of lies and liars that we deal with today. Revelation 19:15 tells us that when Jesus returns and sets up his kingdom, out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that's his word, perfect and infallible, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron. The FCC, or whoever it is that's in charge of the media during the time of Jesus' reign on earth, will not allow satanic, leftist, Marxist, pro-abortion, pro-Sodom, anti-biblical news propaganda to air during the Kingdom Age like we have to put up and endure in these last days. God's moral law is eternal and unchanging, and the lawgiver has already said, "Thou shalt not raise a false report." What a day that will be when news reports will be true and not given a satanic spin. I can't wait for Jesus to set up his kingdom where his children will rule and reign with him for 1,000 years, and then rule and reign with him for an eternity thereafter.